Hey everybody, so what's happening now with the Brexit in Europe is quite interesting. It's causing markets all around the world to slide. A huge drop in the Dow Jones on Friday, down more than 600 points. And the British pound experienced a very sharp drop in value. There you go, you can see a chart of it that somebody tweeted out. So yeah, very big deal. What is happening here? What is actually going on aside from what the mainstream media has been talking about? I'm not going to get into specifics of the names of the various politicians in the UK who pushed for Brexit and those who pushed to remain in the EU. I don't want to get that detailed. I just want to give you an overview of what I think is actually happening at the macro level here. And this is just my opinion. This is not financial advice. This is not a prediction. Although it may come to pass that this is exactly what happens, it's definitely not a prediction. So basically, populations are changing. The demographics are changing. Millennials are now in positions of power, or at least have some influence, some money collectively. And these are people who are now, 30, 35 years old, somewhat integrated into the establishment, and yet these are people who primarily grew up on the internet, grew up with video games, so they're not really thinking about the world in the same ways as their predecessors. And so although there are a number of political issues that pushed the UK to vote to leave the EU, the European Union, that obviously has a big impact on both currencies in the region, and it has an impact on the idea of the nation state in the modern age. And these two things are actually closely connected. So, when you get a sufficient number of people together, let's say 10 million people, or 100 million people, or 300 something million people in the case of the US, when you get a very large quantity of people together for a long period of time in a certain specific piece of land with borders around it, over time that develops into a nation. And the leaders of these nations take up all kinds of notional power and notional authority in their regions. And then, more recently, some of these governments and some of these elites have taken it upon themselves to issue currency directly, to issue fiat currencies, and they decree that it has value, and therefore consumers and citizens and visitors are all supposed to just use these tokens as currencies. Until something better came along, BitCoin, of course, and it could be argued that something better already existed, gold. But before something mathematically better came along, cryptocurrency, fiat currency, to the person who doesn't think all that deep about these things, fiat currency was actually an improvement because it's more efficient than moving around bars of gold. And in reality, it's not efficient at all, because at the foundation of the fiat system is, a series of constant controlled explosions. So that's not a very sound foundation for your money supply. These currencies are constantly collapsing against each other. You look at Venezuela over the last 3 years, they say the price of goods and services, things like food, things like transportation, have gone up by 14,000 to 19,000%, just in a few years, just in one country, Venezuela. So that particular land mass, that particular very large group of people that calls themselves a nation, they lost faith in their own value token. They lost faith in how it was issued, or more likely, they lost faith in its ability to preserve value. And I don't see the West as being immune from this at all. I think that what happened in Venezuela, what's happening in China, where their population is losing faith in the currency and turning to things like Bitcoin and investments in foreign countries, they're losing faith in their uncapped fiat token that their elites and their government issues. And so I think that not only, the political aspect of Brexit, that now millennials and now even older people like boomers have been connected to the internet for so long and have strong independent sources of information, so they can't be hoodwinked by centralized power brokers anymore who want to stay in charge politically, or in charge of the money supply, or in charge of the culture, or whatever it happens to be. So I primarily see this restructuring as being demographic driven. You have more informed boomers, you have more informed and finally sort of empowered millennials, and that's driving shifts in how we view the nation state and how we view citizenship and what that stuff actually means. And money, again, is very closely connected to the idea of citizenship and the idea of the nation state. And as we get more political fragility, as more decisions come out like Brexit, now they're saying that Scotland might do a vote for independence. It could very well end up being that the European Union crumbles and they have to decide on a new unit of value because their token, their uncapped token issued by unelected elites. Are you starting to see a trend here? A lot of uncapped fiat tokens floating around the world, and a very rapid loss in confidence in the establishment institutions that issue these tokens. So I'm predicting definite increases in volatility. Young people are going to start to look at these currencies as something that's just not worth trading your labor or possessions for. And if enough people do that, the value of these currencies can crater very quickly. Look at what happened to the British pound in the hours after the Brexit decision. Hell, in the minutes after the Brexit decision, that's when that drop happened. That could happen to any currency where a sufficiently large percentage of their population decides that this is not a good store of value, this thing just doesn't have a good enough track record. And I think that if things really kick into high gear and a lot of confidence is lost in multiple currencies, it will attract the speculators and the kind of more predatory investors who are just going to short the living hell out of these fiat currencies and drive them into the ground. I think that is entirely possible, and happening, in parallel to all this stuff is this emergence of cryptocurrency, this emergence of blockchain technology. If you were to put me in a time machine 6 years ago, and then I were to pop out today, not having seen any news stories or any software projects over the last 6 years, and if you were to show me, the Bitcoin white paper and the Ethereum white paper, how smart contracts can be done on a blockchain, and Bitcoin, how currency can be done on a blockchain, how electronic cash can be done without a government, without centralized power brokers, without a central bank issuing these tokens, how the tokens can just issue themselves through a mining process. If you were to show me all this stuff for the first time today, I would be like, oh, that's cool, but I would not really see it as the replacement for a large portion of the economy's currencies. I would not see it as a replacement for things like PayPal. But when you think about it, since I have seen the evolution over the last several years, since I haven't been sitting in a time machine, I've actually been living through this stuff, for whatever reason, for many reasons, humans around the world, millions of them, have decided to place economic value on some of these blockchains, on some of these cryptocurrencies, just as they place economic value on a bar of gold or a gold coin. They're placing economic value on a rare Bitcoin or on a rare Ether. And why are they doing this? Clearly it's not just a speculative bubble, because the price of Ethereum has gone up and then cratered somewhat and then gone back up. That's not typical performance of a bubble asset. The same with Bitcoin. It started at $0 some 6 years ago and went up tremendously and then came back down in the 2013 crash. And then there was an increase in stability, an increase in usage, and now it's going back up again, it looks like. So that is not bubble behavior. It's certainly unusual behavior, but it's not the behavior of a bubble. It's the behavior of a brand new asset class. So a lot of thoughts in this one video. I don't want to overwhelm, but if you're interested in more of my thoughts on Bitcoin and Ethereum and gold and sort of post-national currencies, where all this stuff is headed, my new primer is out. I'll put a link in the description below if you want to buy it and download it instantly, and you can pay for it with Bitcoin or with traditional stuff, credit card, bank account. PayPal is pretty good about that. And yeah, it blows my mind that 15 years later, I'm still using the same thing to pay for stuff online. We were using PayPal 15 years ago, using PayPal today, and yet everything else around me is different. I'm not using the same camera I was using 15 years ago. I'm certainly not using the same phone. I don't have the same computer. So why is our money basically the same? Why are we transferring value in basically the same ways? Since I have seen this evolution of blockchain technology, since I've been following it closely, yeah, the fact that currency values in some countries are changing so quickly, just all this stuff provides a huge window of opportunity, a lane of opportunity for cryptocurrency to move much faster in its evolution than it would have otherwise. So, in other words, Bitcoin is significant on its own because it allows people to transfer value close to effortlessly. All you need to know is the other person's Bitcoin address, and you can send them money in a matter of seconds. And they can be in China, they can be in the UK, you can be in the US. It just really removes borders from money. That to me is significant on its own, but the fact that the very foundations of fiat currency, the very foundations of modern money, are being challenged and are crumbling right before our eyes, because that stuff is happening, that's even better for Bitcoin. That means that the evolution could happen even faster than some people were predicting. So that 10 to 20 year adoption curve for cryptocurrency might end up being a 5-year curve. It might not take that long at all for financial institutions and consumers to get on to sound money, to get on to rare commodity money, whether it be a bar of gold or a Bitcoin sitting on a USB drive. At least you know both of those things are provably rare in a way that fiat currency just is not. If I go on to CoinMarketCap or if I go to coincap.io, I can see right down to the exact penny, right down to the exact Satoshi of how much the cryptocurrency industry is actually worth at that moment in time. I can see the breakdown of what Bitcoin is worth, of what Litecoin is worth, of what Ethereum is worth. You cannot do that with fiat currencies. The value is so notional, it's so arbitrary. If I go outside right now and spend $20, I can't then go on to blockchain.info and see how many dollars are being spent in my city right now. It's just people walking around with sheets of paper that are issued by various centralized authorities, and it's prone to counterfeiting in a way that cryptocurrencies are not. You just create something that resembles a $20 bill. I wouldn't recommend doing this, it's illegal, but lots of people do this. Lots of people counterfeit money, and there's a percentage of our economy that is just people stealing value from the rest because they're successfully counterfeiting, copying what our paper tokens look like. You can't do that with a cryptocurrency. You can't do that with a cryptographic token. It's actually a rare digital object on a blockchain. Very exciting stuff. When you look at the bigger picture, there's so much chaos in the world today, and there's going to be such a loss of confidence in some of these national currencies. And for the first time ever, there are real alternatives for people, whether it be cryptocurrency or gold. The fact that gold money is doing so well, a publicly traded company with more than 1 million users now, using gold as a transactional medium. That's crazy. That's the way it should be. We should be using sound money. We should be using something that is actually rare, so that when you trade some of your labor or some of your time, which is irreplaceable, if you work for somebody for a week, you can never get that week back. Don't you want to be paid in something that's real, not just some made-up sheets of paper that they're going to devalue at some point in the future, or that they're going to print into irrelevance, as happened in Venezuela? Some food for thought. I think I'll leave it here. But again, the new primer's out. Get that in the description below. This is the last time I'll be promoting the primer, just because I only like to promote my stuff when it first comes out, when it's really fresh. And then I don't really want to be attached to it anymore. I want it to have a life of its own. So that is it here, everybody. And if you're brand new, hit the red button below to subscribe. Of course, it's free to subscribe. That just means you'll see all my future videos when you're logged into your YouTube account. And that is it.